Mr. McGlue's Feedbag is the 22nd episode of the fourth season of Two and a Half Men. This is directed by Jon Cryer. I think this is the first one directed by Cryer. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. And as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And generally, I really enjoyed this episode. A lot of really great moments. Didn't love the ending. Not that I'm not happy with what happened. I just think it should have been a bit funnier, and I'll talk about why I feel that when we get there. But it starts off with Charlie coming home very, very drunk, and Alan was a bit of an idiot, to be perfectly honest. Charlie is so drunk, he is making what Berta later refers to as his blackout chili, because it's chili that he makes when he is so drunk, he has no recollection of having made it in the morning. And despite the fact Charlie is making that chili, Alan thought it was a good idea to ask Charlie in that moment to help Jake with his book report the following day, because Alan has to go to the DMV. And I'll talk about the DMV. First of all, usually with Two and a Half Men, I go through things chronologically. But with this one, I think it's just a little bit easier to talk about the DMV scenes first, and then we'll go through the main narrative with Charlie and Jake. So Alan goes to the DMV, and we meet various characters while he's there. He's pretty close to being next in line. The guy next to him is his ticket, the number on his ticket's way down the line. And then a woman comes next to Alan, and she sits down, and I didn't initially pick up on what she was doing. Maybe she wasn't doing anything to begin with, but she was then on the phone to her son. And her son was in the car, and she comments that he's going to be late for his piano lesson because her ticket number is also way down the line. And Alan, being a good person and also clearly being attracted to this woman, decides to give her his ticket. And would you know, he's next in line. Very clear that she was doing that on purpose. That was then reinforced when her son actually comes into the DMV, and he's a fully grown man, kind of stereotypical rough biker image, not this sweet little boy Alan thought he was. And I thought it was an interesting part of the episode. I quite liked the scenes down at the DMV. I thought they were good fun. The main narrative, though, focuses on the fact that, well, first of all, when Jake tells Charlie that he's supposed to help him with his book report, at least Alan had the mind to tell Jake that Charlie's going to help him because Charlie wasn't going to remember. Charlie suggested he lets the book percolate a little bit, which in general is not always terrible advice when it comes to writing, but I think when it comes to a child, that's basically code for procrastination. And Charlie decides to take him down to the track instead. And Alan would not approve of this. Charlie knows this. And they're not meant to tell Alan that they've been down to the track, but it becomes a little bit difficult because Jake decides to bet on the horse with the 80-1 odds. And Charlie says it's a ridiculous bet, but Jake wants to do it, so he does. And we cut immediately to the car ride home, and Jake is fanning a wad of cash. His horse won. And we have some really, I don't usually care for car ride scenes that much, but we have some really funny moments here. And one of my favourite moments in that scene is when Jake is kind of bad-mouthing Charlie. And Charlie says, "You want to walk home?" And Jake replies, "I don't have to walk home," because he's got this wad of cash to pay for, as he suggests, a taxi or a limo. It was good. When they got home as well, and they're saying how they shouldn't tell Alan, Jake says that now he's the one with leverage because it's a secret that Charlie's making him keep. And I just thought Jake was absolutely fantastic in this in this episode. And he's going to hide the money in a shoe. Alan comes home at that point, so Jake scarpers off to his bedroom, and Alan obviously goes through to see Jake once he's come home because he's been out all day, he hasn't seen him, and as Alan walks in to Jake's bedroom, I also feel like Alan should be knocking and waiting for Jake to say he can come in. I feel like Jake's at the age now where knocking and waiting is more appropriate, but nevertheless, Alan barges in just as Jake is throwing the money all over himself, all over the bed. Honestly, it's a fantastic moment, very well executed, very funny, really thoroughly enjoyed it. We then get to see a tiny bit of Jake throwing the money around. He gives Charlie $100 because he broke a lamp and he's going to buy shrimp or something. I wish we'd got a little bit more of that. I think we could have got a little bit more comedy out of seeing Jake spending this money, and I don't know, I just feel like it's a little bit underdeveloped. And then he ended up buying a bike from somebody at a gas station, and the bike is falling apart. And the next scene, the final scene, on the one hand, was very heavy. But at the same time, I don't think it was a decent final scene. And I will explain what I mean by that. So we immediately cut to the next scene after the bike has basically fallen apart. And Jake's really upset. He is really upset because, well, partly because he's lost over $1,000 and also because he was swindled out of that money and he feels horrible. And it's honestly a really emotional scene. And I don't think it's a decent final scene. We do try and get a bit of comedy out of it because Alan says the lesson here is that if you get some money, you should put it in the bank. Having that nest egg is a really great feeling. Alan leaves the room and Charlie says there are at least 8 better feelings. Or I think Alan might have said it's the best feeling in the world. And Charlie's final remark is, I can think of at least 8 better feelings. Alan calls for Charlie or calls his name. And that's how we end things. So it does try to lift the mood towards the end, but it just felt like a really heavy final scene, and I was left needing something else. I was needing a bit of comedy, and I just didn't get it from that final scene. So not a great way to end it, but other than that, I do think it is a really solid scene. Personal highlights would be the scenes at the DMV. I just really enjoyed those. And the car ride home, which is unusual for me as I generally don't care for scenes in cars, but just Jake's attitude, just Jake in general was really brilliant. I think it's a really solid episode. Not the best ending, but that aside, Mr. McGlue's Feedbag is a pretty solid episode of 2.5 Men.